Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Members, I think there's no question that Jonathan Mitchell is mad. Jonathan Mitchell is an attorney who's spent a lot of time masterminding ways to circumvent the judiciary in pursuit of an issue that he feels very passionately about. I think most people on this floor feel very passionately about the subject of abortion and the role in the state, the role of the Constitution, in that whole area. But I submit to you that this bill and Jonathan Mitchell's actions and devices go far beyond the issue of abortion. He was the mastermind behind Senate Bill 8, and he got a temporary pass from the U.S. Supreme Court, the majority of whom declined to intervene at this stage. But then he lost. He lost in Texas. And the status of the law right now is that his clever device to circumvent judicial review of laws involving constitutional rights and constitutional provisions is on appeal. But he's mad. So he dreams up something else. This is a very, very intelligent guy, which is why I'm shocked that this is so vulgarly un-American, so vulgarly contrary to the system of checks and balances that we've relied upon in this country for 200 and some years. And I would say to anybody, and I've said this to groups in Dallas in my own district, that you may be pursuing certain political goals where there are really, really deep disagreements among people, and you're winning, and you're happy about it. But something like this, I think you ought to ask yourself, is it worth the price? Because there's a system of checks and balances that the framers of our Constitution and the philosophers upon whom they drew for centuries before that figured out to set our country up for success, to guard against despotism, to guard against a tyranny of a temporary majority, so that we would have a stable government that respected the rights of all of us. And there will come a day when different people are in power who do not share your agenda, social or otherwise. And at that moment, you are going to wish that you hadn't torn down the walls of government in order to get your way. That's what this bill does. Never in the history of Texas has this legislature ever said, we're going to pass a law and tell the courts you don't have the right to review what we're doing. That is anathema to our system of government. And so the issue of abortion is a profound one. My colleagues have spoken very, very well about it, and I agree with everything they said. But I want you to think even past that. What's next when the courts can't review what a legislature does? And again, those of you who actually feel passionately that the underlying social policy agenda of this bill is the correct one, what about when you think it's not the correct one and we pass a law that says, by the way, the courts can't review this? And by the way, we are going to make a judge personally liable for having the audacity to fulfill their oath of office and have to pay $100,000. When we tell attorneys, be careful which case you take because we might make you liable for the other side's attorney's fees if you lose. That is not the system of justice that we've relied on. And it's not one that I think we can rely on. You know, we created business courts in this state so that we would have stability and predictability in the law. This is anything but stability and predictability in the law. This is Wild West in the worst way. Just to highlight a couple of the things that go on here, we do have this attorney's fees shift that's rigged. We have a new statute of limitations that's unlike anything we've ever seen. We've got judicial liability. And then there's the resurrection potentially, or at least a reference that this law, a little sentence in there, is somehow going to reanimate a 1925 law, the status of which is currently being discussed in the courts. There's so much in here other than trying to stop pharmaceutical companies from shipping abortion pharmaceuticals into Texas. That's not really what this is about. That's already illegal. And if you really wanted to tighten up the enforcement of that, we could have done that in a page and a half. But instead, we have a much more ambitious, a much more destructive bill that I think is kind of a vanity play to Jonathan Mitchell. And whatever your political ideology, I don't think we ought to be the tools for him trying to redeem himself after having failed to circumvent the courts. Time will tell whether he ultimately circumvents it, but I just don't want the Texas legislature to be that tool. I don't think it lightens anything up a bit, but I am reminded when I was talking with Senator Hughes about recourse here, the bill states on its face that you're allowed to assert your constitutional rights, but I guess only in federal court, not in state court. And if you're in federal court, but you can't get to federal court unless one of the manufacturers is joined. So if one of these vigilante bounty hunters that are created and enabled by the statute comes after someone personally and sues them and they're in Texas, you're stuck in Texas court where there is no recourse. So I was thinking about poor Charlie Brown. You know, he always wanted to kick the football and he would run up. And what happens? So you can assert your rights, but you can't win. You can run up and you can try to kick the ball, but Lucy legislator took it away. You don't have your rights in court. I don't believe that any of you, upon reflection, sometime down the road, are going to think it was worth the price. We can have this abortion debate over and over and over again. You can win, you can lose, but don't tear down the structures that we all rely upon. We all rely on a judiciary that has the power to review the legislative branch of government. We all rely on judges that have the power and the freedom to carry out their oath of office. We even rely on attorneys to represent us without fear that they're going to have to pay the other side's attorney's fees. So because of the dramatic transgressions of fundamental principles of Western law contained in this bill and the massive destruction they do to the system of checks and balances and the precedent that it sets for everything else we might do in here, whatever you think about abortion, I believe very strongly that you should vote against this bill to preserve the way we run our government in Texas.